Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and today we have another What Have We Been Watching, and we have a lot of big name titles on the docket today.
Oh, yeah.
Saltburn, Renaissance, May December, Godzilla -1, so much to talk about, so let's just dive right in. Saltburn. This has been a movie that people have been anticipating all year long. Some people give it high acclaim. Some people say it's one of the worst of the year. Matt, where do you stand?
Going into this movie, I think I was expecting it to be a lot crazier than it was. This movie's been hyped up on like TikTok. I think it's gotten TikTok famous because people are like, oh my god, look at this insane, disturbing movie. It's so crazy. You've never seen anything like this. And that's just so wrong. It's so surface level. It is all style, no substance. There's a line very early in the movie where the character Farley says, it's not so much what you say, it's the style in which you say it, which I think kind of sums up a lot of what Emerald Fennell is doing in her filmmaking overall. You know, I had really liked Promising Young Woman, and on my first watch, I had kind of not given it a whole bunch of credit. I was saying like, it's a bit of a mid-revenge story. And then when I rewatched Promising Young Woman, I was like, oh, I think this movie's a lot deeper than I originally gave it credit for. But now, after seeing Saltburn and seeing how surface level this was, I wonder if my initial interpretation of Promising Young Woman was actually the right one. And it wasn't deeper than I thought it was at first. Saltburn is just so bland, and the class politics are terrible. It reminds me of when Parasite came out. There was like a certain sect of people who were like, oh, it's such a great dissection of how the working class leeches off of the wealthy, which is not what Parasite's about. That is the worst interpretation of Parasite. And it's like Emerald Fennell read someone giving that interpretation of Parasite and went, bet I'm going to make that movie. A movie about how the working class, all they want to do is leech off of the wealthy and take from them because they all want to have what the wealthy have. Looks nice, though. 6 out of 10.
I don't know if I can agree about it looking nice. So last year, I Love Babylon, and I was really shocked at how some people responded. They called it empty, boring, all over the place. It made no sense to me. After watching Saltburn, I get it now because that's how I feel about this movie. Some of the technical elements are captivating. I do agree. Sometimes the cinematography does look good. A lot of times it just looks like, oh yeah, let's do some cool flashing strobe lights. Let's shoot it very dark. Let's backlit it.
What if
let's
we put a
do
mirror
tracking
in the shot?
It's not very interesting to look at. I could not care less about this plot. Like I mentioned before, people saying Babylon's boring. This movie is an hour less, and I found myself feeling like, oh my gosh, we're still here. It's going on and on. The pacing is so poor. Jacob Elordi fan cam, cool, like it. Jacob Elordi, good actor in this, but like outside of that, there's nothing to really buy into. I did find Felix's aura to be inviting, and like I could buy why people did like his character. But on the flip side, with Barry Keoghan's Oliver, I found to be such a nothing. There's nothing to his character. It's so surface level. It's unbelievable, and it's very predictable. Within like the first 5 minutes, you can kind of guess where you're going. So many people say like, oh my gosh, this movie's so crazy. It's so out there, but like everything is so telegraphed. And when it does try to be crazy, it's the most tame version of the crazy stuff. When they try to be crazy outside of the one needle drop at the end of the movie, it's the most surface level, unprovocative way. It's like, oh, how do we make a provocative movie without like being provocative and off-putting those people? And that's what I found Saltburn to really be. It does succeed, as I mentioned before, with those Elordi fan cams and his character. Elordi stuff, solid. The rest of it, besides some moments of dark humor sparse throughout, I found very unappealing. I would give this a very, very light 5 out of 10.
I will say I really liked Rosamund Pike. Her performance was a lot of fun. She delivered what I think a lot of the movie was missing, which was that nastiness. The upper class is really nasty and mean, and underneath the surface, like they can be really brutal. I got it from her, but from no one else. Everyone else was just like, they're kind of there. They're just kind of foolish, naive, but like
that's
they're
kind
not
of where
mean.
I agree with this movie fails is it kind of makes the wealthy characters who they're trying to make fun of the more sympathetic ones, while Oliver is just such a little shit, for like a lack of words. Like I don't care about him, and I think he's in the wrong in almost every situation. Yeah, Farley's a little jerk throughout, but the stuff Oliver does to him is so much worse than anything Farley does to Oliver. Felix, I think, is the most warming person throughout, and the sister has her moments of like, oh yeah, I can see why people do like y'all. Also, talking about this movie being very overhyped, Carey Mulligan gets like a scene, I heard endless stuff like, oh my gosh, she's so good. This is so captivating. I was just super like, this is it.
If you've seen The Talented Mr. Ripley, this is Mr. Ripley's less talented younger cousin. Just watch The Talented Mr. Ripley. It is so much better. Sorry, it doesn't have Jacob Elordi fan cams, but like, it's just a better film in all ways. Saltburn is just mid. It's mid, and I'd be very disappointed if this got any Oscar nominations. I guess I wouldn't be pissed if Rosamund Pike got a nomination, but for most others, I would be like a little bit.
Well, we go from a movie that we both really didn't like to one I would say 10/10/10s across the board. Renaissance, a film by Beyoncé, is a beautiful dive into the mind of the queen of the Renaissance, the one, the only Beyoncé. This is following the footsteps of Homecoming, where Beyoncé and her crew gives a peek behind the curtain to see what really goes on into making this masterful production a reality. I really appreciate the backstories of specific songs. They go in about like Uncle Johnny, and they go in about Houston. They go in about various stuff throughout. I very much dug the switching between the multiple shows throughout to showcase the gorgeous costumes. Normally, I'm not really a fan of showing the fans, but as Beyoncé has said throughout the rollout of Renaissance, the fans, the audience, they are the visuals. And I felt like immersing them into this concert with them singing along, them dancing. This is a Beyoncé movie, but like Beyoncé is not really the star. Like she's in it throughout, but it's more about the people around her and the people who are coming to see her. And I found that all to be very captivating. Oh my gosh, this is everything I want at a concert documentary. No hate to Errors, but like Errors was just like, here's the concert, view the concert as if you're there. But I was so much more immersed into Renaissance. Maybe that's some bias coming in. I actually attended this show. I think Beyoncé is one of the best musicians out there right now. And I thought this did a great job of capturing what was the essence of being in those venues, as well as here's everything that goes into making this just so grand and on an epic scale.
I will say I really loved Homecoming, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing this. I might not end up seeing it in theaters, though, because there's so many other things to see right now.
I would say this is better than Homecoming.
Ooh, interesting. On the other hand, I saw May December that came out on Netflix. I'd previously read the screenplay of May December and really enjoyed it. I couldn't wait to see what Todd Haynes did with it. Upon watching, I wasn't a huge fan of Todd Haynes' direction. After finishing it, I was just kind of, overall, a little unimpressed. It was decent enough, but there were some things that were missing, and I felt like it was a bit of a downgrade from the screenplay that I'd read, even though it was mostly the same. The way that they tackled it didn't really come to life in the way that I had expected or hoped. But then I started thinking about it more, and I read online tons of people's commentary on the film, and I started seeing scenes again. People pointing out certain small moments, or even just people analyzing elements of Charles Melton's performance, reading more about May December, reading about the treatment, hearing why the melodrama was really employed, because reading the script, I viewed it as much more of a naturalistic film. Todd Haynes took it almost to a soap opera level, and that didn't work for me upon watching, but upon reading about it and seeing why. You know, it's this lurid affair, this scandal, and seeing how the film's really about how Charles Melton is completely alone in all of this. Joe is going through all of this with no support. I started to appreciate it a lot more, and I want to rewatch it soon. So I'm going to give this one, for now, after reading all of that and having my opinion swayed, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, but I could see this one going up on a rewatch.
I watched this all the way back at the end of October, so I'm really excited to rewatch it as well. I originally gave it an 8 out of 10 out of the Virginia Film Festival, but I, like you, thought this movie was very interesting. I think maybe more interesting to read about, learn more about the story. I also was not really a huge fan of Todd Haynes' direction, but I did think he had a very creative eye behind the camera, but the screenplay was very witty, it was smart, and it was funny. I didn't really find this to be as campy as a lot of people had said outside of the score. I know that we've talked a bunch about campy and whatnot throughout this channel, and to me, I said this last week on the What We've Been Watching episode, Napoleon is so much more camp than May December ever could be. I guess I can see the angle people coming at it, but still it's not something I see, and I see that you agree with me as well. Our ensemble here is just so stacked. Julianne Moore perfectly depicts this archetype of a character who we're not supposed to sympathize with, but see the positives and negatives to her character throughout. Natalie Portman executes her role of an actress who's trying to get what she wants and just does it so well. And I really like the reveal at the end. And then Charles Melton, I know that you weren't as high on his performance, but to me,
no,
he's one of
I
our
was.
Best.
Coming out of the movie, I was kind of just he was just kind of there. And then reading more about him and going back and watching clips, like I watched chunks of this movie over again. I don't think I gave him enough credit at first. When I first finished the movie, I was like, Julianne Moore is my favorite for sure. Upon reflection, it's got to be Charles Melton. I believed that he was in a state of arrested development. I totally believed that this was someone who had not grown past the age of like 16.
I really, really, really love that sequence that takes place on top of the roof. I think that very much added some more humanity and life into this character, because as you originally talked about when you first saw the movie, you were a little bit light on him. I could see those moments in the first half of this movie, because that's kind of where the character's supposed to be. You're supposed to be distant, reserved from him. And as the movie goes on and on, we see more and more layers of this character opening up, becoming more emotional. And I just think Melton nails all of these moments, whether it's the scene with Portman at a hotel, or if it's on the roof, or it's talking with his dad. I just think that Melton does so well. He would be my second favorite supporting actors of the year behind Sterling K. Brown in American Fiction.
What I was saying when I first got out is like, oh, he's got 2 good scenes, but outside of that, like, I didn't feel like it was doing a lot. But then rewatching some of those earlier scenes with the knowledge of how he plays those later scenes, you see the repression of this human, this person who has never had any support. And even now, as they're making a movie, no one's there to hear his side of the story. Natalie Portman's there to explore the complexity that is Julianne Moore's character. Gracie, Gracie is like so complex, and so we got to know her story. But like, why are we not asking about the child who was abused? Why is he not being supported? It's a fascinating movie that I cannot wait to go back to see. I might watch it again before the end of the year, actually, so that I can accurately place it in my end-of-year list. But to move on to the next one, we both saw Godzilla -1, a movie that was not on my radar until this week, that I loved. I think it's the best Godzilla movie that has ever been made, and the reason for that is so often in these monster movies, the human drama is just simply not as interesting as everything else. It is a common thing to get great monster action and then the most boring plot with humans you could possibly imagine. Godzilla King of the Monsters is a great example of this, where the monster action between Godzilla and some of the other monsters like King Ghidorah, Mothra, oh my god, there is so much luscious visual work happening in Godzilla King of the Monsters. But then the rest of the movie is just Millie Bobby Brown running around. It's garbage. And so I was so pleasantly surprised to get a Godzilla movie where I actually wanted more of the humans. Their story was so compelling. If you took Godzilla out of this movie, it would still work as a story of a kamikaze pilot adjusting to life post-war, adjusting to the shame, feeling like he does not have the honor that his fellow soldiers did. That's a compelling story in its own. And then you add in some of the best, some of the scariest Godzilla moments in any movie ever. You get a great film. And I'm going to give this one a light 9 out of 10.
I went into Godzilla -1 completely blind. I saw no trailers, no marketing material. I just had a friend who was like, hey, Dylan, you want to go watch this? And I'm like, yeah, I haven't talked to you in years. Let's catch up. And you know what? I am sure glad that I said yes, because this movie was so engaging. Everything that had to deal with Godzilla was just so captivating to me. I don't really know what the budget was here. I'm guessing it was probably even smaller than the creator, but just like that movie, it just knows what to do with its budget. Godzilla looks so realistic, looks so good. Like, yeah, maybe it doesn't blink, but besides that, this is probably the best Godzilla's looked in any Godzilla movie that I've seen so far. I do agree with you. The cast of characters that we do have here bring life into this role that is often lacking in these type of movies. I very much was engaged with our central character and his relationship with this woman and the child, as well as the neighbor, as well as the people on the first island that we go to, as well as the people who he ends up working with throughout the rest of the movie. I saw this in IMAX. The sound was so immersive, and I really like the visual style that the director brought here. Obviously, not everything can be great. To add some of my maybe small critiques here, there were some editing transitions and sound mixing errors that really pulled me out at some moments. Maybe it's because I was sitting at the top of the IMAX and I was closer to the speaker, but they were very much magnified this time around, where maybe some other movies I wouldn't have noticed them that much. But this movie was such a great time, and I'm very excited to see what this director does next with Godzilla movies, or going back to watching some of his previous work.
Well, he wants to do a Star Wars movie next. He's pitching himself for Star Wars.
If they give him creative control, I can see it being pulled off.
This was one of my favorite surprises of the year. I would have never gone to see this in theaters if you hadn't told me it was great.
Positives here from Fantasy Filmball. We're suggesting great movies to each other, because on that roll, suggesting another movie I've somehow liked a lot, and that is Trolls Band Together. And if you know me, I love the music from these Trolls films. I found the original to be fun, but very forgettable. World Tour to be one of the worst movies in a very, very, very poor year for movies. Band together, well, I would never expect this movie to have the most couple goals of any movie I've seen this year so far. A year that includes so many romantic or drama or just love-infused films. No, Trolls Band Together takes that award. The way that Poppy and Branch accept each other, push each other to be better, and are always supportive was just so adorable. And sure, this has the typical kids movie jokes, some slow moments, and corny dialogue overall, but Band Together is just a fun time with great music and a great voice cast from top to bottom. I found myself on multiple occasions bopping up and down to various tracks and dance numbers throughout. This is definitely my favorite of the series so far, and there's some very, very interesting and cool animation sequences throughout where if this wasn't such a stacked year for animation, I could see this being like a surprise type nomination like The Boss Baby, where it gets in because of the animation style, maybe not so of the critical or box office type of the movie.
So now moving on to the weekly speed run. I've watched less films this week, so we can move through this pretty quick. Kings of the Road. I was halfway through when we last did our weekly What Have We Been Watching, and I finished it, and it is an excellent road movie from Them Vendors. This is largely improvised, and it follows two men who drive a truck from place to place in Germany, fixing projectors in movie theaters. It's a beautifully shot film that really embraces the essence of what a road movie is, which is nothing but a car and the open road ahead. The limitless possibilities of where life can take us. This film is excellent. I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. Loved it. Highly recommend to you, Dylan, as well, because you liked Perfect Days. You should watch Kings of the Road. If you like Wim Wenders, this is one of his best. Then I watched Soy Cuba, which is a propaganda film from the mid-60s. It was a Russian-Cuban co-production, and it was shot just after the Cuban Revolution. It follows 4 different stories of how the West is, and capitalism specifically, is keeping Cuba down. It is possibly the most stunning looking film that I've ever seen in my entire life. The way the camera floats around. There's multiple long shots where my jaw dropped. The famous long shot in Soy Cuba is you see a funeral procession going and the camera starts to lift up to the sky. The funeral keeps moving away from us, but we start to move up and we start to see people on their balconies looking out at the funeral. And then we get up to the top of this building. Somehow, the camera moves across a building, goes through a workshop where everyone's making cigars, and goes out the window and continues to follow the funeral procession through the sky. How did they do this? I do not know. This was the mid-60s, and it's still possibly the best looking film that has ever been made. I'm giving this one a 10 out of 10. The filmmaking prowess on this is unmatched in anything else made before it or since. God damn. I also watched Lola Montes, which is a film by Max Ophüls. It is a German-French film. It's stunning looking in a beautiful widescreen. The costume design, production design, gorgeous. But gonna be honest, I didn't get much more out of it on a story or character level. It was just fine for those, but the production values, the cinematography boosts it quite a lot. I'm gonna give this one a light 8 out of 10. And finally, I watched De Humani Corporis Fabrica, which is an experimental film from just this past year about the inside of the human body. It takes us into a Parisian hospital, and it uses experimental new cameras in order to essentially enter into the human body during surgery. This is a graphic film that I had to look away from multiple times because I am very squeamish and I hate seeing blood and guts, and this was all blood and guts. It was very gross, but it pushed the boundaries of what a camera can do. It's an experimental film that transforms the inner workings of the human body into almost an alien landscape. It looks like we're on a different planet most of the time rather than just inside flesh and blood. This is a fascinating film that I'm going to give a 7 out of 10. It's not one I ever want to see again, but it's cool that it exists.
For this upcoming week, we are seeing movies because we are always seeing movies. I had another screening of The Color Purple here tonight. Excited to see how my thoughts go on a second viewing of The Color Purple. And then I hope to dive into Dream Scenario and The Boy and the Heron before the next time that we talk.
I'll also be hopefully rewatching The Boy and the Heron. I cannot wait. I want to see it in IMAX. I'm going to be seeing Maestro as well, finally.
Ooh,
and yeah. I don't know what else I'm going to see. You know, I'll mess around and watch some other stuff. We'll see.
Here's a question for you. Obviously, when you saw The Boy in the Heron the first time, you saw it subbed. If you rewatch it, are you going dubbed or are you going subbed again?
I want to go dubbed. I want to see Robert Pattinson playing the Heron.
That's where my conflict is here, because normally I always go subbed, but the voice cast here makes me want to watch it in dubbed.
To be fair, the voice cast on Studio Ghibli films is always excellent. Like, they always get top of the line English language dubs. That's how I first watched My Neighbor Totoro. That's how I first watched Spirited Away. It's how I first watched Howl's Moving Castle. So there's really no harm.
That helps ease my mind, so I very much hope to dive into that this upcoming weekend. But however, since we started recording, I got an email that I have to go to work, so who knows if I actually have time to watch any movies this weekend.
Oh, we'll see. Hopefully you do.
Thanks. Well, for everyone out there, make sure to drop us a like down below, subscribe, all that good stuff helps us, helps you stay involved. But until next time, my name is Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.